Namaste. My infinite gratitude at the lotus feet of the Divine Mother and Rishi Aurobindo. My sincere pranam to the entire Sakar team for their unstinted and ceaseless labor towards the divine's manifestation and the divine's work upon earth. Dear friends, Sri Aurobindo Center for Advanced Research, Sakar is uh, performing a series of talks under the title Eternity's Delegate on the various aspects of Sri Aurobindo's life, his genius and versatile life, I would rather add. And today I am going to reflect something on Sri Aurobindo as a journalist, an aspect which is rarely discussed, but which had played a very pivotal role in Sri Aurobindo's making, in the dissemination of Sri Aurobindo's message, in the widening of Sri Aurobindo's message and his consciousness. His role as a reformatory, as a rebel, as a revolutionary journalist is one of the most heartening and glorious chapters of India's freedom struggle. A struggle where and which he very consciously shaped by his love, his light, his intellectual prowess, his wisdom, his knowledge, his power, and his deep love for the Matrabhumi, for Motherland. My topic precisely is journalism, a mighty tool of Sri Aurobindo's nationalism. Within or during the next half an hour and 45 minutes, I will be discussing how Sri Aurobindo very cleverly, very wisely used the power of pen to arouse the sleeping lions that were the Indians at that time. How he used his mighty pen to discuss, to deliberate, to realize, and to reflect on the hidden and latent aspects of Indian society. How brutally he attacked on the marauders, on the Malechas, on the foreigners, on those devils and ghouls who were busy trampling the very breast of Bhavani Bharati. And how that force accumulated itself into a national spirit of awakening. How it touched and transformed the life of no less than Subhash Chandra Bose and even our first premier Pandit Jawharlal Nehru. While penning the foreword of Dr. Karan Singh's book Prophet of Indian Nationalism, Pandit Nehru honestly and candidly accepted the impression of Sri Aurobindo through the fiery pages of Bande Matram. Nehru was at the time an adolescent, but he could smell the fragrance of Sri Aurobindo's tapasya that was spread everywhere from Bengal to Calicut and from Orissa to Nagpur to Gujarat to southern India. He has admitted that he rose like a meteor, though for a time being, apparently for the time being, for the outer eye, for the eye of the onlooker, it was just for 5 or 7 years. But the deep drama was more recondite and it was more secret. And Sri Aurobindo was, actively involved in the shaping of India's destiny right after he launched his feet on the Apollo Bandargah, Apollo port in Bombay on February 6, 1893. Amal Kiran, in his beautiful poetic book, The Poetic Genius of Sri Aurobindo, writes that how should we crown Sri Aurobindo? Is he bigger than a yogi? Is he more powerful than a philosopher as a philosopher? Is he more influential as a sociological thinker? Is he a poet? Should we adore him as a poet? Because at one phase of his life, Sri Aurobindo said, I'm primarily a poet. And he adds that everywhere Mount Everest seems to face Mount Everest. All aspects of Sri Aurobindo's life are equally superior, subliminal, supreme. Generally, when people start talking about our Gurudev, eternity's delegate, Rishi Aurobindo, they introduced him as a poet, a philosopher, a Mahayogi. But Sri Aurobindo was much more before these identities. He was an administrator. He was a professor. He was a staunch nationalistic revolutionary rebel leader. And with these identities, he was a journalist. He aroused the sleeping soul of Mother India, the people languishing in slumber and sloth and hopelessness, without health, without light on the top for them to guide. They were like a rudderless boat flowing with the flow of the current, with nobody to guide them or act as a rudder. When Sri Aurobindo, after a long gap of 14 years, he touched the shores of Mother India in 1893, he headed straight away to Baroda. The first reflection I believe he did about why India is in her present condition, why our mother is under foreign subjugation, why are we, what are we, what is the cause of this cowardice, what is the cause of this chaos, what is the cause of this miserable condition nationally? And look, the 21 years old fiery philosopher just descended from the ramparts of Cambridge, embellished by all intellectual rapiers of mighty logics of the West. How he came there, discussed something with his Cambridge friend K.G. Deshpande, how he began writing in Indu Prakash, and how the mighty series of 9 articles, New Lamps for the Old, began. Dear friends, there is much light in the very first line. It would have been sufficient had Sri Aurobindo stopped the article by penning that single first beginning line. What does he say? A virulent attack on the plight of Indian people. and an attack on those who are supposed to lead them. The Indian National Congress, 7 years back, just 7 year old at that time, he said in his article, the first article in the Prakash, if the blind lead the blind, shall they both not fall into a ditch? The first blind word is used for the National Congress Party. Perhaps Sri Aurobindo had smelt the fate of Congress way back in its very inchoate situation. When it was a baby, he had noticed its future. He had, with his Trikala Drishti, he had read the future of Congress. So that's why this virulent attack on the lethargic Congress, on the directionless Congress, on the spineless Congress, on the marrow and boneless Congress. So the first blind word is used for the Indian National Congress, the leader. And the second blind word is used for the masses, the hoi polloi, the general masses, the Indian people, innocent, smug, and directionless also. So directionless people are being directed again by directionless people. Blind man is guiding a blind man. What will be the repercussion? They both will fall into a ditch, never to stand again. This was as a journalist, not formal journalist, but the way Sri Aurobindo read the air and atmosphere of his time, the way he measured the causes of India's gradual decimation. This is his compendium, that the masses are being led by blind and directionless leaders. So this is going to be a super flop show. Again in the second series, because Indu Prakash was a weekly, so in the second series, again he wrote, and again he deciphered the causes of India's weaknesses, her oppression, her opprobrium. And the causes were, he writes, our actual enemy is not any forces exterior to ourselves, but our own crying weaknesses, our cowardice, our selfishness, our hypocrisy, our purblind sentimentalism. We Indians are very sentimental people. Everyone walking on the road has a Ram Kahani. And everybody wants to scale the ladder of success in life by narrating that Ram Kahani. Everybody wants to garner support through a sympathetic tale. At one time, when the nation is against the brute foreigners, in view of humanity, in a free and liberal and liberated and heightened people, sentimentalism is a noble sentiment. It shows that we are human beings. We have humanity, humility. But when everywhere around us, foreign lions are roaring to suck the blood of the motherland, and Bhavani Bharati is lying languished nearby, crying for succor, trampled, trodden, wounded, then there is no sentimentalism needed. So how beautifully, how insightfully, in just 3 lines, Sri Aurobindo defines the actual enemy of India's national growth and liberation. Our actual enemy is not any power or any forces exterior to ourselves, but our own crying weaknesses. Everywhere I see weak people, feeble, effete, viryahin, people without virya, without retas, without ojas, without tejas. Everywhere she could reach those masses without dream and direction, without fire and force. So he came to this conclusion that the Britishers just took advantage of our own weaknesses, as any sagacious or shrewd enemy would. But to blame for our subjugation, for our suppression, for our poverty, for our privation, for our prevarication, to blame everything, to point the index finger towards the Britishers or the Dutch or the Portuguese or the French for that matter, is really not the cause, really not the actual remedy of national evil. So he directly spotlighted the real causes of India's weaknesses, its poverty, its foreign subjugation, its long suppression. Those causes are inherent in the Indian people itself. My dear friends, after that tumultuous period of Alipur jail, where the fiery nationalist Sri Aurobindo became a spiritual Mahayogi, one who had realized Vasudeva Sarvam. When he left the ramparts of Alipur jail on 18 June 1909, in Dharma, the magazine he established and edited in Bengali, he wrote that powerful mantra, Durgastroth. What is again Durgastroth? Far from the traditional Durga Stuti. Durgastroth, though not, Durgastroth came through the pages of Dharma, but it was a secret spiritual weapon to awaken the sleeping souls of slumbering Indians. By self, again, he talks about selfishness. He talks about decimation, gradual decay. He talks about the inherent enemies there too. Antasthripu, the inherent enemies, the Trojan horses. And then he mentions that selfishness, fear, small thinking, these are the things that have decimated the very sacred body of India. So what is the need of the hour? In 1909, Sri Aurobindo realized that the youth of the nation should invoke the Bhagavati in their own personalities. They should not rely on her outward support. They themselves should become full of Durga force, Durga Tattva. मात दुर्गे हमारे शरीर में योग बल द्वारा प्रवेश कर. Enter into our bodies, use them as sanctuaries by the force and fire of Yoga Shakti. हम होंगे तेरे यंत्र, we will be your mighty instruments. तेरे प्रकाशमान दीपक, तेरी बलशाली तलवारें, use us as your mighty instruments. They are not adoring Mother Durga to come down and fight on behalf of them. They are invoking the force of Kali and Krishna in their own selves. So this was Sri Aurobindo's subtle way to arouse the sleeping lions that we Indians were at that time. Dear friends, when Sri Aurobindo started again at one more point, in one of his letters written to his third brother, perhaps Sejda, uh, Barin would call Sri Aurobindo Sejda, the third brother uh, in their rank. So, in one of his letters, Sri Aurobindo addresses the weakness of Indian people to think independently. He talks about the thought phobia. As I mentioned earlier, the first thing that he reflected upon after touching the sacred soil of Mother India was to reflect deeper on the causes of India's gradual decimation and its downfall. And all this reflection goes in this series through his letters, through his addresses, through his mighty and fiery pages and editorials. He's trying to address these issues. He's deciphering the causes and he's boosting us. He's sharing with us the spiritual vaccine of re-emergence, punarbhav, punarodaya. He's again boosting us through his words. So while writing to Barendra Ghosh, he again says, and I'm quoting this from this beautiful book by D.K. Roy, Sri Aurobindo came to me. I am fully persuaded that the origin of the weakness of India is neither political servitude nor material poverty. Many people still harbor the belief that because we were poor, so we were quickly captured by the Britishers. This was not the case. Still less the dearth of spirituality. There was no lack of spirituality. Lack of spirituality is not the cause of our downfall. We have degenerated. Now Sri Aurobindo is explaining the real cause. We have degenerated because of the wanting of our capacity to think and concentrate. We have lost that thought power, that vichar shakti, that chintan shakti, that brahma chintan shakti. And that's why India is in its present condition and suffering lot of maladies and miseries. How painfully, but as a satire, he says that except for a few solitary giants, everywhere you meet the average man who has no strength, who does not want to think nor can. The average man, the people, the persons incapable of thinking independently and fruitfully. The average man, Asat Manus. There are few solitary giants, a couple of in Bombay, some in Nagpur, some in Pune, a dozen in Bengal, some in the southern fields, but they are all solitary giants. Their composite reflection rolled together cannot save the nation. For a nation to be strong and mighty and prosperous and powerful and to scale multifaceted heights of greatnesses, it is necessary that every Indian should be an independent thinker. So here again, very categorically writing to Bahrain that we are decimated because of our this weakness. And dear friends, though not part of this talk series, but I would suggest to you to go through that powerful essay own original thinking, which is compiled in Essays Divine and Human. The first necessity there Sri Aurobindo indicates, if India is to survive and do her appointed task in the world, is that the youth of India should learn to think. But then he further elaborates, to think independently, fruitfully, energetically, to think on all subjects without prejudices, without preconditions, without prejudgments, ascending sophism like with the mace of Bhima. This kind of sublime chintan, this kind of supreme reflection will save and support India. These all were powerful tools and indications and signal flares by Sri Aurobindo. Coming down to Bande Matra, which was started by the mighty, one of the mighty warriors among the Trimurti, Lal Bal Pal, Bipin Chandra Pal. But soon all the responsibilities fell on the shoulder of Sri Aurobindo. What did Sri Aurobindo? Okay, before that, I will be discussing that revolutionary pamphlet in 1905, Bhavani Mandir. This is also a very powerful attempt by Sri Aurobindo to discuss and debate the nature, the Rupa, Swarupa, Swabhav, the character of our nation. Three very powerful things emerge from that excellent hypothesis, that excellent invocation, that excellent recordation of sadhana. One still feels or gets goosebumps while going through the lines of Bhavani Mandir. Number one, by that pamphlet, Sri Aurobindo discussed what is India. Number two, why is India? And most significantly, why is India weak? What is the one needful thing for India? Remember, this is 1905. There were national leaders, plethora of leaders, who in their wildest dreams could not imagine about independence, about Swaraj, about Swadesi, about passive resistance, about the philosophy of boycott. All of these tools systematically were presented by Rishi Aurobindo before the nation. After second and third decade of the previous century, Mahatma Gandhi very wisely used these tools. But if you go through the pages of Bande Matram, Karmayogin, and New Lamps for the Old, and that revolutionary pamphlet I'm referring to, Bhavani Mandir, you will realize that Sri Aurobindo had laid the very foundation of our swarajya by invoking the greatness or the sleeping strength or the languishing powers among Indians. He had given the whole roadmap, and it can be conveniently stated that the nation was not prepared for his lives. And that's why, by the Bhagavad Adesh, he had to withdraw from the political scene for the time being. Inwardly, he was sustaining and supporting and nestling and fondling the nation in his mighty force, in the embrace of his mighty arms. When you go through the pages of Bhavani Mandir, you clearly come to know that Sri Aurobindo associated Matrabhumi not with some phrase, not with some piece of land, not with some imagination of the mind, but with mighty Shakti. He invoked that Matra Bhav among Indians about their motherland. Our most sensitive chord is connected to our mothers. When something happens to the mother or to mothers, we are just aroused. We are just stirred. We are agitated. So Sri Aurobindo connected the Indian masses' relationship with their motherland, which was for them otherwise a piece of land or a figure of speech or a figment of mind and whatnot. He established that holy bond of mother-child relationship, that India is not this, India is not that, India is your motherland. She's your mother, she's your mighty Shakti. You have to bow down before her. You have to invoke her power. You have to sacrifice everything for her safety and security and peace and prosperity. In his second message through Bhavani Mandir, Sri Aurobindo categorically stated, emphatically said, that India cannot perish. Our race cannot become extinct. We are not going to be dinosaurs or mastodon. Because among all the nations, it is India for which divine had chosen a very splendid destiny. It is India's role and responsibility to make Sanatan Dharma, to harmonize and combine and all the philosophies and religions of the world as a big brother, as a custodian, as a patron, and to make mankind, and quoting him, one soul, to arouse that ekatma bhav among Indians. And that is why India cannot be perished. He was dead sure way back in 1905, when the partition was Bengal was going on, when there were agitations everywhere, when there were fears and insecurities everywhere. Sri Aurobindo was sure that nothing can touch India. India, the Holy Land, will be always there to stand for humanity as a protector, as a custodian. But at the end of his quotation, he says, in order to Aryanize the world, India needs to re-Aryanize herself. Only a rich person can help others. God has Ashwarya, that's why we call him Ishwar. God has things and gifts and powers and potencies which we can't have and we don't have. And that's why we go to temple and as an art and weep and cry and shout and complain before the Lord. So unless we have those abilities in himself, unless we have those Arya Bhav within us, how can we Aryanize the world? India's mission was, I'm quoting again Sri Aurobindo from the Bhavani Mandir, to purge barbarism out of mankind. Whatever is ugly, whatever is dastardly, whatever is dirty, whatever mentally, intellectually, emotionally, physically, environmentally, whatever litter we have thrown and strewn around, it is India's responsibility to purge mankind out of this barbarism. So unless that duty is fulfilled, no power upon the blue sky can touch India. Sri Aurobindo was dead sure. And then the third thing, he realized that Shakti is the fuel, Bhakti is the wick, and Shakti is the fuel, the oil. Without fuel, without oil, the wick of the bhakti cannot sustain for long. So he laid more emphasis on Shakti instead of bhakti. And only one thing that India needs today, he categorically said, that is strength, strength mental, strength physical, strength intellectual, and above all, strength spiritual. So, with his Jai Ghosh, with his triumphal chant, with his rishi like roaring, Sri Aurobindo said that we need not bhakti at this critical juncture of our country's destiny. We need Shakti, we need power to take on this bull of colonialism, to take on this Mahisasur that is trampling the spirit of India, that is disintegrating and disemboweling the spirit of India. And then again, when he was in Alipur jail, he calls that period an ashram life, because he realized Sri Krishna. This was the supreme blessing of Sri Aurobindo's life, to realize Lord Krishna, to assimilate the message of Bhagavad Gita, to encounter and inwardly have audience with seekers and greatest of Indian sages like Swami Vivekananda, to have their guidance, to have the guidance of Vasudeva Sri Krishna, to realize that spirit of Vasudeva Sarvamittisao Mahatma Sadurlabha. This was the greatest turning point, the moment of moments in the life of our Gurudev, Rishi Aurobindo. Just after coming from the ashram, that was Alipur jail, as I mentioned earlier, Sri Aurobindo gifted us Durgastroth. Then he began Karmayogin in English, despite noticing that there is widespread despondency in the political atmosphere of the country. All major prominent politicians, all agitators, all nationalistic leaders were either deported or hanged. Their spirit diminished. He found the country in utter despondency. But it was not Sri Aurobindo's mettle to sit calm down and to repent the loss. Rather, he again started with his old and worn out tools, his zeal for motherland, his intellectual acumen. He came forward, and in the very next day, on June 19, 1909, he started Karmayogin. He started Dharma in Bengali, and through the mighty pages of his journalism in Bengali as well as in Karmayogin, he again revolutionized the national spirit of India. He again agitated the sleeping youth of India. Of special mention is the article, a couple of articles, which I find very interesting or very essential. The ideal of the Karmayogin, the very first contribution in the Karmayogin. He again laid down the whole foundation of the national resurgence through that article. Everything is in that article. You can call that article a mini book. The ideal of Karma Yoga, and how beautifully he exhorts the spirits of India's youth, that you may not be anything spiritually, materially, but you are everything spiritually. Arouse that Arya Bhav, recover that Aryan character, Aryan thought, Aryan life, Aryan discipline, and there will be nothing impossible for you. Through Vedanta, through Upanishad, through Bhagavad Gita, recover that. And remember that you don't have to recover that only in emotion and intellect, but you have to recover these lost values, this Aryaman Bhav, through your character, through your very persona. You must be living manifestation of these values. Things in emotions and intellect suddenly vanish or they last until the mightier influence comes and takes the better of us. So Sri Aurobindo clearly says that you need to imbibe these things in your spirit, in your life. Live them, and you will be strong and invincible and fearless and mighty. You will have no horror for life and death. No foreign power can touch you. Difficulty and impossibility shall vanish from your vocabularies. So, how he prepared through the pages of Karmayogin the youth, the future leaders, the standard bearers of new humanity, the Amritasya Putra of tomorrow's India, how he prepared, how he used again journalism as a mighty tool of nationalism. We all know that Sri Aurobindo's translation, prosaic as well as poetic, it's supposed till yet the supreme and the best translation of Bande Matram song. His English translation, poetic as well as prosaic, is supposed the best ever done by an Indian. So all these tools are being used. Sri Aurobindo is using these tools, or being used by Sri Aurobindo, are an attempt, a thrust to the movement, to the cause of liberation, ultimate freedom, towards ultimate ecstasy, towards ultimate sublimation of the motherland. And dear friends, we need not to forget one very important thing, that in July 1909, it was Sri Aurobindo who gave the first call of complete independence from foreign rule. Everybody in the nation knows about this. Everybody in the nation knows about the great quotation by, or the great appeal, or the great mantra by Lokmanya Tilak, that Swaraj is my birthright and I will have it. But remember, Tilak said these lines in Belgaum in April 1916. Well after 7 long years, Sri Aurobindo emphatically repeated these lines. It is our duty, particularly of the youngsters, to know our history and to give due place to where it deserves. It was not the great Tilak who gave the first call of independence, swarajya, but rather it was Sri Aurobindo who, on the mighty pages of Karmayogin, like a lion roared that this is our right, that we should be ruled by us, and we reject the right to be ruled by any foreign authority. And he pinpoints that far less inferior than us. How can they rule us? You go through the whole article and you will have lights that we owe much to Rishi Aurobindo. As and when it comes to Arya in 1914, Arya is Sri Aurobindo's tool for his manifestation of supermind and his new message, his sublimated message for humanity as a whole. It was not a message for India as a whole. In the pages of Arya, he discusses Bhagavad Gita, he divulges the secrets of the Veda, he reflects upon the possibilities of the world unity. And meantime, he writes that beautiful Jain wisdom called Thoughts and Aphorism, Synthesis of Yoga, Life Divine. This is all his spiritual philosophy, his yoga sadhana, his yogic vision, his vision for new humanity, for new man, for superman. This is of paramount importance. But through Arya, he was preparing a roadmap for perfect humanity upon earth. But through the pages of Bande Matram, Dharma, Bhavani Mandir, Karmayogin, Bhavani Bharati, New Lamps for the Old, Sri Aurobindo was preparing the Indian spirit to take on the foreign Asura, to take on the Malech, and to awaken and to strengthen the spirit of nationalism in India. So we need, as a journalist, his life needs to be re-reflected, rediscussed, redirected. And we should not forget that this was the phase which prepared Sri Aurobindo, the yogi, the rishi, the avatar. This was the phase, the journalistic phase of Sri Aurobindo's life, the mighty light that is there in the pages of Karmayogin, of Bande Matram, 1000 odd pages. This is the spirit, this is the light which actually prepared that mighty lion, that golden purusha, that cosmic personality, that Vishwa Purusha we call today our Gurudev, Rishi Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo. Many thanks to Sakar and all the team of Sakar, very respected Dr. Reddy and his ebullient team. I send you my greetings from Himalayas and thanking you for the opportunity that you provided me, that I can reflect upon this less talked about topic.